Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The world has watched in horror as humanitarian aid has been blocked from reaching Gaza, leading to a famine that is claiming the lives of those who survived the bombs. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, the Israeli government turns a blind eye to rampant settler violence and openly approves new settlements that could end the very possibility of a two-state solution. So can the Foreign Secretary assure the House that he is doing everything he can to not only end the mass killing, but also to secure a lasting peace between two equal states in Israel and Palestine?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm grateful to my friend for raising this issue. The confirmation of famine is utterly horrifying, and I'm appalled by the shocking levels of settler violence, and I've been clear that Israel must clamp down on that settler violence. The government has introduced 3 rounds of sanctions related to settler violence, including in the July sanctions on Ben Gvir and Smotrich for the incitement of violence against Palestinian communities. The only way to deliver long-term peace and security for Palestinians and Israelis alike is through a viable two-state solution.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Speaker. The remaining hostages in Gaza, those that are still alive, are being starved, they're being persecuted, they're being prevented from getting any full medical aid. So when the Foreign Secretary visits the region, will he then force the International Red Cross to go and seek the hostages to make sure they're given the medical attention that they need?
Well, I know that the Right Honourable Gentleman has always brought the issues of hostages to mind in this House, and I applaud him for that work. I met with hostage families just before the summer recess, and I will again in the coming weeks. The recent sight of those photos of hostages malnourished and starved was obscene, and of course I will do all I can to ensure that they get the aid and support that they need underground in those tunnels.
Philip Van Belden.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the stated war goals of many elements of the Israeli government are not a ceasefire and a lasting peace between two communities living side by side in peace, but to ethnically cleanse Gaza and prevent a viable state in the West Bank. Will he therefore commit to sanctioning the head of the Israeli government, Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, I say to the Honourable Gentleman that he should look closely at the 3 packages of sanctions that we've had since coming to office in this area, and he will see that there is no other country in the world with the range of sanctions against those who incite particularly settler violence and expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Israel has breached 2 ceasefires to date. Its bombing, its killing, and now its starvation has continued for months. It's not just the hostages that are not getting food, it's babies, children, women, and men. So the impunity that Israel has to continue to perpetrate war crime after war crime, atrocity after atrocity. When will the UK and the international community say enough is enough and take real action to put an end to the killing and to help the hostages be freed?
Well, can I say to the Honourable Gentleman, it's not enough to assert it or say it. That's why we restored funding to UNRWA. That's why we've had 3 packages of sanctions. That's why yesterday I announced an extra £15 million worth of aid. That's why I've spoken to my Israeli counterpart nearly every week, or certainly every month in which I have been in office, and that's why we have corralled the international communities with the statements that we've made. It's not about words, it absolutely is about action to bring this to an end.
Jim Shah.
Speaker, the Secretary of State was very clear yesterday. If we want peace, then make sure that the hostages are released. If we want peace, then make sure that Hamas are ousted from from Gaza. And if that happens, then we have the peace that will last. And I know the Secretary of State is committed to that, for he said that yesterday. Would the Secretary of State perhaps just reiterate that again for the Chamber and those who are here? Thanks so much.
Well, I'm very grateful. And the Honourable Gentleman knows a lot about standing up to terrorists. This is a proscribed organisation. There can be no role for Hamas. We need the total demilitarization of Gaza. Those leaders that are there must leave and exit the country. so that the Palestinian people can be freed from the plight of what Hamas is raining down on them.
Chris Law.
Number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Foreign Secretary.
We have been clear that we will recognise a Palestinian state by UNGA in September to protect the viability of the two-state solution unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza and commits to a long-term sustainable peace.
Chris Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the UK government should never have placed conditions on the recognition of the state of Palestine. There is no place for it in international law.
Why now?
However, given it's clear that Israel has failed to comply with these conditions, can the Secretary of State confirm that the UK will unconditionally and immediately recognise the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly next week?
Well, high-level week is not actually next week. It's in 3 weeks' time. But can I say to him, it's most bizarre to say to a responsible government that you should not attempt to change the situation on the ground, to encourage Israel to commit to a ceasefire and to commit to a process. Of course, we should use all diplomatic efforts to do that, notwithstanding what we've said, the assessment that we will make on recognition at the appropriate time.
Mr. Speaker, we all want to see an end to the suffering and progress towards a two-state solution, but what assurance can the Foreign Secretary provide that in recognising Palestine there can be no role for Hamas in the governance of a Palestinian state?
Well, I'm grateful for my honourable friend for raising this issue, and let me be crystal clear. Hamas must never be rewarded, and we won't reward Hamas by the UK's recognition of Palestine if we get to that point. Our demands on Hamas are absolute and unchanged. Hamas must immediately release all the hostages cruelly taken on the 7th of October and held in the most atrocious conditions that we've already discussed in the chamber this morning.
Cameron Thomas.
Speaker, question 13, please.
Foreign Secretary.
Until Putin stops his barbaric assault, we will keep tightening the screws on his war machine with even more sanctions. Since coming to office, we've sanctioned over 680 individual entities and ships. That's more than double the number of designations made in 2023.
Cameron Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, Vladimir Putin is in Beijing this week, where he has hailed the unprecedented levels of ties between China and Russia. For once, I hope the government will actually take him at his word before it builds the Chinese super embassy in our capital. China has ceased exports of drone components to Ukraine, and both Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un are propping up Putin economically. I commend the PM for uniting a coalition of the willing, but what tangible action is it taking to ensure Ukraine wins against 3 adversaries?
Well, I thought one of the proudest moments was watching President Zelensky walk up number 10 and the role that the Prime Minister's played in corralling the global community around the coalition of the willing. He will have seen the Prime Minister with President Zelensky once again in DC just a few weeks ago. And all that we are doing, whether it's on the oil price cap, whether it's on raising the issue of Russian sovereign assets with our G7 and European partners to try and resolve that issue, or sanctions, we are leading the world.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by joining colleagues in sending my warmest congratulations to the Minister on his recent nuptials. Mr. Speaker, over the summer recess, reports emerged of the Russians launching an online catalogue of the children that they have stolen from Ukraine. This grotesque database allows Russian families to search by Ukrainian children by hair colour and eye colour. They are advertising their war crimes in real time. So can the Secretary of State set out what further action the government is taking on this issue, and can he assure me that it will be the highest priority in discussions with the President of the United States when he visits later this month?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this issue once again. It is absolutely a standing item on the agenda with our friends in the United States, and of course we discuss these issues with our friends in Ukraine. And can I say to her that very, very shortly, she will see a further announcement in relation to this terrible atrocity.
So the Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
As Ukraine passes the grim milestone of its 4th Independence Day since Putin began his barbaric invasion of Ukraine, we have seen nothing but sustained aerial assaults and brutality from Putin. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary directly, what will he do to redouble his efforts when it comes to sanctions, but specific sanctions on those that are profiteering and making money when it comes to Russian oil? Because that's effectively what is fueling Putin's war machine and his barbaric assault on democracy.
Well, I'm very grateful for the cross-party support that exists in this chamber on the issue of Ukraine. We've done a lot to lower the oil price cap, which I think has been essential. We, alongside the previous government, have the largest package of sanctions anywhere in the world against Putin's war machine. I can't comment on further sanctions from the dispatch box, but she will see an announcement very shortly.
We now come to Dr. Sir Ashley Fox.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody want it? From bench? Foreign Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I updated the House on the unimaginable bleak situation in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories. I shared the latest on Iran's dangerous nuclear programme, and of course my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, set out Britain's unwavering support for Ukraine. Can I also mention the tragic earthquake in Kunar province in Afghanistan, and we've announced a package of support for those who have been killed.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary wants to pay huge amounts of taxpayers' money to Mauritius to lease back a military base we already own. Why is he afraid of holding a vote on this policy?
I know that the honourable gentleman's not been in Parliament very long, but he will see that there's a second reading next week, and of course there will be a vote.
Ryan Lushman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. For Palestinians, if suffering decades of oppression and apartheid, thousands being killed, millions confined into an ever-reducing area as their homes are stolen and communities are destroyed wasn't bad enough, now the American president is devising a plan to carve up what is left of Palestinian territory for prime real estate. Will the Foreign Secretary categorically say at the dispatch box today that under no circumstance will the UK support this reprehensible plan to ethnically cleanse Palestinians and create a Gaza Riviera or a Trump Gaza or whatever this grotesque plan is?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend that we've been clear right throughout this crisis that Palestinian territory must not be reduced in the conduct of this war, and we do not support the forced displacement of people. Palestinian civilians must be permitted to return to their communities and rebuild their lives.
David Patel, Foreign Secretary.
The Joint Committee on Human Rights had a recent report into transnational repression and recommended that China be placed on the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme alongside Iran and Russia. Now, clearly this follows concerns following the China audit and national security strategy. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary, very specifically, when will he recognise that China is a threat to our own national security and put them on the enhanced list of theirs?
The Honourable Lady and I exchanged debate when we published the China audit. There was discussion at the National Security Strategy, and of course the Defence Secretary also set out his concerns about Chinese activity in the South China Sea in the Defence strategy. There's been lots of debates and discussion in relation to China, and I've been very, very clear that there are areas where we will cooperate, but we will always challenge where we must.
Dame Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 7th of August, I wrote to the Foreign Secretary about the deadly sectarian violence that we have witnessed in Syria, which threatens further destabilisation and fallout that we all know could come soon. While I've not received a response, I did specifically ask in that letter, would he make his call for justice and accountability for those responsible for the recent killings? And the reports are very shocking, Mr. Speaker. And does he agree that there could be a role for the Commission for International Justice and Accountability, with whom I understand the Minister for the Middle East met and praised in Damascus just last week?
Well, I'm very grateful for the Honourable Lady raising this issue. It was important for me to look into the eyes of al-Shara when I was in Syria, and the Middle East Minister was in Syria also very recently. I have been concerned about the increase in terrorist activity, about the position of minorities, and of course we continue to discuss this with the Syrians. We're also worried about those in the neighbourhood, like Israel, some of the activity destabilising what's going on, and of course I will look at the issue that she raises.
Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents, Lee and Joanna Woodcock's daughter Holly, was found deceased in France in August last year. They have raised significant concerns regarding the investigation by the French authorities and some lesser concerns regarding the support they've received from the FCDO. So would the Minister meet with Mr and Mrs Woodcock to hear directly about their experience?
Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, can he accept my deep condolences on Holly's death? And I know this is a very, very distressing time for Mr and Mrs Woodcock and the whole family. He will know the consular support that's been provided. We've spoken about this. I would, of course, be very happy to meet him and the family to discuss this further. He'll understand, of course, I can't get directly involved in overseas investigations by authorities in France.
Callum Miller, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Business Secretary is due to travel to China next week to restart trade talks. His trip would fall 50 days since Beijing announced its latest round of extraterritorial bounties, targeting 19 pro-democracy Hong Kongers, including several more UK-based activists. In an earlier answer, the Minister laid out the many steps to sanction the Georgian government for their assault on democracy. So will the Foreign Secretary implore the Business Secretary to cancel his trip and press for a block on all UK ministerial visits to China until Beijing rescinds these bounties?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In June, the Security Minister and I met with those UK activists targeted by Hong Kong arrest warrants and bounties. We've raised concerns regarding the arrest warrants and bounties directly with the Chinese ambassador here in London, reaffirming that the safety and security of Hong Kongers in the UK is of the utmost importance to the government. And of course, this has been raised at all levels by ministers, Foreign Secretary, and indeed will be raised if there is an occasion in the future, leader to leader.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I share the anguish and profound distress of my constituents about the conflict in Gaza. Many of them have friends and family in the region, and they're living with that torment every day. The Minister will have seen hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens marching for a release of the hostages and for a ceasefire. What is the UK government doing to support those citizens and the opposition parties in Israel who are being so let down?
I thank my honourable friend for her sustained engagement in these issues. We talk, as the Foreign Secretary said, regularly to hostage families in Israel, as well as participants in Israeli politics from right across the spectrum. We will continue to do so. We make our disagreements with the Israeli government clear, both in private and in public, and we will continue to do that as well.
Sarah Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 23rd of July, my constituent, Dr. Lindsay Fitzharris, a British citizen by naturalisation and who is currently undergoing cancer treatment, was denied boarding her flight home to the UK from the US, a journey she's made numerous times without trouble. She was then told to contact the FCDO for an emergency travel document, but that took 3 weeks, including interventions by me, to get her home for treatment. Can I ask, Mr. Speaker, how does it take 3 weeks in an emergency? So will the department apologise to Dr. Fitzharris and investigate this matter fully?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Office seeks in its consular assistance to always provide timely support to the British nationals overseas. I'll investigate the case and report back to the member.
Or a Kirchner.
Mr. Speaker, this week the International Association of Genocide Scholars passed a resolution concluding that Israel's conduct meets the legal definition of genocide as laid out in the UN Convention. They note in particular the killing and injuries of 50,000 Palestinian children. What assessment does the Foreign Secretary make of this resolution, and does he agree that we must go further to ensure accountability for these crimes and justice for the Palestinian people?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her work on these matters. We have seen these reports. The Foreign Secretary referred to them in the House yesterday afternoon. As I said earlier, the threshold against which the government must test itself is the one that we outlined in September, which is about the real risk. We have found that there is a real risk, and our actions have flowed from that determination.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been more than a fortnight since the Alaska summit, and the deadline set by President Trump at that time has now passed. What diplomatic effort is the government doing to maintain US focus on the Ukrainian theatre of operations in the face of Russian intransigence?
Well, can I assure the honourable gentleman that I and of course our NSA are in direct touch with the Ukrainians on these issues. The Chief of Defence Staff was in Washington last week following up on these issues. He leaves today after 35 years of service to our country, and I think we're all grateful for the work that Tony Radakin is doing. And of course the Defence Secretary is also coordinating via the Coalition of the Willing.
Sarah Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to welcome the statement yesterday from the Foreign Secretary and the government's commitment to recognising the state of Palestine later this month. But with the attacks on the Nasser hospital last week and over 119 children now having died due to starvation, what further steps are we taking to evacuate the most vulnerable? And while stacks of aid stand unable to get through to Gaza, is the Foreign Secretary keeping under review the use of further sanctions to put greater pressure on Israel to end the blockade of this life-sustaining provision?
My honourable friend has been a long advocate for these questions. I pay tribute to the work of Save the Children and other UK NGOs who have continued to do dangerous but life-saving work in Gaza. I met with many of them over the recess. There are a number of restrictions, not simply in relation to the passage of aid into Gaza, which we have discussed in this House a number of times, but also in relation to the function of the NGOs themselves, and we keep a very close interest in this and have raised it with the Israeli government.
Ms Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents who fled Hong Kong are deeply worried about the silencing of democratic voices there and the uncertainty the proposed change to indefinite leave to remain creates for their long-term security here in the UK. What steps is the government taking to hold those responsible for the erosion of Hong Kong's freedoms to account and to give reassurance to Hong Kongers who have sought refuge here?
I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this important matter on behalf of her constituents, and I want to reassure her that the UK government has called numerous times on Beijing to repeal the NSL legislation which provides for the autocratic treatment of people abroad, such as her constituents, and we continue to work closely with the Home Office Minister, the Security Minister, to ensure that anyone here in the UK is safe and that their families in Hong Kong are also safe.
Kim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK is the penholder on Yemen. So can the Minister explain why the government still continues to support Israel when they have admitted to the killing of Yemen's Prime Minister and other ministers and causing widespread devastation? Widespread devastation. What steps has the government taken to support Yemen in achieving peace, reconstruction and development and ending the humanitarian crisis?
Mr. Speaker, I would just like to clarify for the House, because there's been a number of different reports about this. We believe it is the Houthi Prime Minister rather than the Yemeni Prime Minister who has recently been struck. The Houthis, as the House know, are a threat not just to the people of Yemen, to the region, but also to international shipping. I've engaged closely with the Yemeni government, including both the previous Yemeni Prime Minister and the current Yemeni Prime Minister, who I'm happy to report is still alive.
Sir Edward Lee, Father of the House.
Would the Foreign Secretary agree that
one of the worst aspects of the actions of Israeli authorities is the continual stripping away of the dignity of the Palestinian people in Jerusalem and the West Bank. Only last week, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch learned that for the first time in history, Israeli authorities were to launch a property tax on their churches. There was international outrage, their bank accounts being frozen, but that has made a difference. So can we, as a House and as a government, stick up for the rights of the Palestinian people? Not even the Ottomans tried to impose a church tax.
Well, I'm grateful to the Father of the House bringing to mind the situation in the West Bank. And of course it's important that Israel has its full security, but the violence, the expansion, the denial of funds, the chilling effect on civil society, all of this is of huge concern. And of course that's why we fund and support organisations on the ground and work with civil society.
Bill Stone.
Speaker, we are at a pivotal point in our defence procurement. Is the Minister engaging with allies like Morocco to use defence exports as a way to bolster trade and relations?
My honourable friend has extensive experience in defence, and I'm grateful for his question. During the UK-Morocco strategic dialogue in June, both sides agreed to deepen our defence industrial cooperation, and I'm glad that 2 MOUs between the UK and Morocco have since been signed, thanks to the work of the Foreign Secretary.
Roger Gale.
Speaker, it's now some weeks since President Trump invited the leader of the Russian Federation to the United States of America, since when Putin has increased his assault on the civilian population of Ukraine and has shown no sign whatsoever of reaching the ceasefire that was desired. So Trump's initiative has failed. Will the Foreign Secretary use his visit to the United Nations next week to call again for real United States sanctions upon Russia?
Well, I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. We do applaud President Trump's efforts to bring about a sustained and sustainable peace. And there are detailed discussions going on now about the security guarantees and what role the United States may play as a result of that summit. But our assessment is that Putin is not up to seriously negotiate, and we condemn the killing that has continued and the loss of life, including a security guard who was injured at the British Council.
Chair of the Select Committee, Sarah Chair.
Mr. Speaker, we need to recognise that due to climate change, conflict and population growth, forced and economic migration is only going to increase. My committee will shortly be publishing a report on displaced people, both the drivers and possible solutions. And I note with concern that Jordan, a country that houses many refugees, is receiving a 35% cut this year. So can the Foreign Secretary outline his strategy to keep people safe and economically viable in their own or host countries? And how can it be achieved with a dramatically reduced ODA budget?
Well, I'm very grateful to the work that my right honourable friend continues to do on her Select Committee for championing the cause of people across the world and the suffering. She will be pleased that climate remains a priority, notwithstanding the changes that we've had to make in our development spend. And we will continue to work upstream in countries because we recognise that climate is often driving migration route. And so we have to continue this very important upstream work.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Given Communist China's predictable support for the killer in the Kremlin's campaign of murder and mayhem in Ukraine, why is the government rewarding China with a super...
There is no reward. The honourable gentleman will recognise that this is a quasi-judicial process that must be approached properly, and under the Geneva Convention, all countries are entitled to an embassy.
Brisbane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first pay tribute to my constituent Anne Strike for her constant campaigning for the eradication of polio. Sadly, we've seen cases of polio in war zones like Gaza. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary or the Minister what he's doing to ensure that we eradicate this disease once and for all?
I thank my honourable friend for the important question. It is an issue not just in Gaza, but in Afghanistan and Pakistan, as he knows. Eradication is vital. We are committed to an eradication campaign. We have helped 600,000 children. We will continue to work on this vital question, including in my region.
Gregory Capp.
Speaker, the Secretary of State reiterated the issue about the conditional recognition of the state of Palestine. Would it not have been better if he wanted to do that, he had equally made a condition on a future state of Palestine, not threatening the right of the state of Israel to exist? And if anyone carried out terrorist actions from any future state, they would be handed over to the international authorities.
Mr. Speaker, there have been some important commitments about the future nature of any Palestinian state, including from President Abbas, who said that any such state would be demilitarized. There was absolute clarity in New York, where we made the announcement about the recognition decision, that Hamas can have no future role in Gaza, that a future Palestinian state must pose no threat to an Israeli state. Two states requires two states living in safety and security and posing no threat to each other.
Tracy Gilbert.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the sanctions the government have put in place on the Israeli government, as in its current form it is not a reliable or trusted partner. Has the Foreign Secretary ordered a review of the UK's relationship with the Israeli government over the last 13 months, and if not, why not?
Mr. Speaker, I set out the detail of the sanctions to which my honourable friend refers. The Foreign Secretary has also announced a review of some of the elements of our bilateral cooperation with Israel, including a number of steps in relation to free trade agreements, etc.
David Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the leadership the Foreign Secretary and Minister for the Middle East showed over the summer in their visit to Syria and engaging the Syrian government, especially around the violence that took place in Soweto. But as UK Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion and Belief, I was particularly worried to see that violence especially affected the Druze and Christian minorities in that country. So what more can we do to work with the Syrian government in order to ensure that they protect all of their citizens regardless of their religion?
My honourable friend asks vital questions. I raised these directly with both the Syrian Minister of Justice and the Syrian Foreign Minister last week. Clearly, the violence both in coastal regions targeting Alawites and in the south in Soweto targeting Druze and others was deeply concerning. The Syrians have conducted an investigation relatively independently in relation to the violence at the coast. I called on them, as the Foreign Secretary has before, to do everything that they can to ensure that minorities in the new Syria feel safe and protected by the Syrian government.
Andrew Merson.
Despite the strategic dialogue just referred to by the Foreign Secretary, the government has decided to veto the UK-Morocco power project. So what is it doing in practical terms to maintain the momentum created in our relationship by the association agreement signed with Morocco in 2019?
There was no veto. It's right that government look at all projects through a value for money lens. I was very pleased to be in Morocco. I remain engaged with the Foreign Minister, and I will build on that strategic visit. There's much to do over the coming months.
Jez McClaren.
I was very pleased to read that the government is finally taking steps to rejoin the Erasmus Plus programme, something, of course, the Liberal Democrats have been calling for some time. So will the Minister now set out a timetable, mandate and expected terms for UK reassociation with that programme?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go into the details. We're involved in many different discussions with the European Union following our historic summit on the 19th of May. I attended the Gymnich with foreign ministers just last weekend in Denmark. We're progressing this alongside with my colleague in the Cabinet Office, and we'll provide details in due course.
Final question, Sonia Kumar.
Mr. Speaker, Save the Children reports that 61% of pregnant women and new mothers in Gaza were malnourished in early August. A sharp rise linked to the blockade and health system collapse. Will the government consider enabling the medical transfer of pregnant women needing specialist care in the UK and outline its strategy for supporting Gaza's long-term recovery, stability and maternity health? These children are the future of the two-state solution.
My honourable friend is right, as our colleague was, to raise the fate of pregnant women in Gaza and indeed those who have recently given birth. I'm very happy to meet with her to discuss these issues in greater detail.
Right, we'll let the front bench change over.